Hi, I'm Bob Doyle, the information philosopher, coming to you from my ITV Studio website here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I thought I'd give you a new view of my studio today. In this view, you can see all the screens, the computer screens that I have available to me, and I can switch between them and switch between many cameras. At the moment, the big screen behind me is showing the program, which is going out here, and that gives us this unusual video feedback in which the program is seen in the screen, and it's like the Morton salt shaker where the little can has the view of the little woman on it. As you fade into the distance, you have an infinite number of screens. If I was to come back to my main screen, you'd see the same phenomenon here. But let me come back to this screen for a moment and just talk to you about what I'm trying to do. I have two Microsoft Surface Pro here, and these give me the ability to have a screen which can be enlarged easily. And in this particular view, I've got some words here which are the top of my blog. I now have an information philosopher blog, and I use that every day to set up an introduction for you to what I'm presenting in this lecture. So I can switch to bring that to the screen behind me, and or look at it from my front-looking screen. Let me turn off my email address, although I hope you'll have noticed it enough to consider contacting me if you have questions or would like to participate in this program. In the future, I hope to have guests here and or guests coming in by Skype, for example, which would allow one or two or even several persons to participate in one of our lectures. Let me come back to my screen 5 view of things, and you'll see that besides the main screen, which has the topic of today's lecture, I have a smaller screen off to this side and another smaller screen off to this side. Those two correspond to what's going on the screens next to my switcher here. So this screen has the title, The Wave Function is Pure Abstract Information. And of course, it's on the main program because I've selected it here to be going out over the program. So today is a Monday, and so today we're going to take some topic from great problems in philosophy and physics. And today I'd like to add the idea that we're also going to work on problems in biology and psychology, and maybe some others later in the week. We take up the topic of metaphysics, for example, which has a separate book and a completely separate website. I wonder if I can bring that metaphysics website up for you to see. Here it is on this screen, and there it is on the big screen. And here's an example of what I can do with my multi-touch control. I can make that screen highly visible. And if I just take this over to this view again, you see how I can manipulate it again with my multi-touch. And I can send that particular screen to my full screen. And let me turn off my email as I showed you. So this gives me a wonderful set of tools. And my goal here is to make this text coming from one of my computers, my Surface Pro, be readable to you. And that's turning out to be somewhat of a challenge if I have small font type and so forth, because it isn't easy to read on some screens. A friend just tried to look at it on a television screen, and the text was really too small to see what I was doing. Perhaps that's enough of this for today. I can look around from other screens. This is my standard view. I usually come into you and turn my music on and say a few words about the importance of information. Let me show you how that works. Let's see if I go to my number one screen. You may not be able to, camera, you may be able to see that, then again you may not. Let's see if I can zoom in a little more tightly. There's my left-hand screen. There's my switcher in the middle. And here is a screen which allows me to do, if you can see that, my mouse is going around right here. Let me show you how I can actually further zoom in if I'm careful. I'll do this again, and you'll see I can just start my music. And you should be hearing that behind me. I have not yet worked out the methodology whereby I can hear that music. I've designed and built this studio, and it has a large number, actually 10 different video signals coming in, 3 from computers and 7 from my cameras. And then I also have the music playing from another. But if I make the music play into the room, it creates a big feedback loop, and so I can't actually hear the sound you're hearing now. But I'm glad that it's playing, and later on I'll listen to it when I'm reviewing the program and see whether that's the right amount for what I'm trying to do. So let's come around to our problem. And in order to do that, I need to switch back to my Information Philosopher blog, which is as a WordPress site, one I've used for about the last 8 or 9 years. And maybe I've had another one called the Bob Doyle blog, which goes back to 2001. So I've been doing that for 17 years. I made a transition from Bob Doyle blog, which focused on my work building things like this studio, which were tools to allow organizations or individuals to communicate with advanced tools, from filmmaking back in the 1970s to video, in a time in which I built a video studio for undergraduates' use at Harvard University, and then built another at Brown University where I was an undergraduate. And I've always in my life felt that what I'm doing is trying to provide especially young people with the latest state-of-the-art communications tool set. Over the years, the cost of making films, I helped to bring it down into the thousands of dollars with consumer cameras, Super 8 movie cameras in those days. That company I founded, called Super 8 Sound, is still out in California in Burbank, and it's still providing tools for persons entering into the film industry. And in the last couple decades, I've watched video cameras start out very low resolution and incapable of really doing very nice work, in my opinion, to the point where they're now even a $200 or $300 camera can produce very high definition video like this one you're seeing today. I'm actually struggling to get to the state of the art of what's called 1080p, the high definition standard. I'm using you're seeing a rather low definition, but it's still called high definition by some, 720 lines or 720p. So I've spent a lot of time concerning myself with that technology in order to get other people to be more able to reach out, put their ideas into the world. But in the meantime, for decades, I've been studying philosophy and, of course, physics, astronomy, cosmology. And I have, since early 2000s, been putting up web pages on my website. So what I want to say is my website is the fundamental place I have been trying to get ideas, my own ideas in some cases, but primarily the best ideas of the best thinkers from ancient times down to the present day on several big topics. I spent a great deal of time on free will, and that led to my first book, which is, as I've mentioned every time, available to you for free if you don't want to own a print copy. The print copies are available on Amazon and in bookstores, but you can download a chapter of the book. There's some 35 chapters, one PDF at a time, or the whole book in a single PDF, and that way it is available to you for no cost. And if you are a professor who is using some of this material in your classes, you can assign it for reading and the students can look it up on their laptops or today on their smartphones, provided I get the resolution enough to make that readable, which I've struggled to do. So before we come to today's topic of the abstract nature of the wave function, which is a cross you'll see between philosophy and physics and quantum physics, because it connects, we'll see, to the mind, and it brings up this very strange idea that the universe itself has a mind, or every bit of matter in the universe participates in mind. Otherwise, the argument goes, where would mind ever have evolved in the universe? Where could it have come from? Because it's a fundamentally different kind of thing from the material universe. And we've had for centuries the idea of a mind-body duality or an idealism-materialism duality. Let's go take a look at those a little later in the program. But besides the book on great problems, if you go to my website, let's switch over to this screen, and you'll see my web page, shrink it down to fit, contains a lot of drop-down menus. And my goal is to teach you those menus so you can drive around this website. I'm happy to be lecturing. I always enjoyed lecturing. Only did it for a few years when I was getting my PhD from Harvard. And then I had to go off and make myself an independent living for myself and my wife. And we stepped away from academia. And I missed the kind of contact with students. It was really a wonderful time. But I'm very happy now, instead of lecturing to 30 to a few hundred students, I am able, I hope someday, to reach that same number, or maybe a much larger number, coming, or that I'm reaching through the internet. I've been preaching since the 1990s that what I call internet television, which I also am calling today webcasting. I'm doing webcasting 5 days a week. The notion of an ITV is to say you have an independent internet individual television capability which bypasses, goes around or over perhaps any requirement that should you want to have a program, you need to go through the television industry somehow. Years ago, you had to go to a local television station, see if they would present your material. Many years ago, we developed the idea for local cable companies that they should offer public access to their citizens in each city. And I'm lucky enough to live in an advanced city, the People's Republic of Cambridge it's called, with lots of wonderful services for our citizens. And here we have a cable casting public access called CCTV for Cambridge Community Television. And I've worked with CCTV for years. I tried to teach people things there for a few years and supported their tools like digital editing video systems, which I was writing about for an important magazine called New Media. I was the digital video guru that was analyzing these new tools. Companies sent me their tools, I studied them, and then I turned around and I gave them to Mass College of Art or Boston Film and Video Foundation or CCTV and others. That was a great experience. But today, still, that's a barrier. The future of television, I think, is a way for you to get a program that you want to make and have it go out to anyone you would like to have see it or anyone who wants to see it. And you can reach them without a contract with a TV station, even a cable station, because you're going directly from a studio, should you be lucky enough to have one. I have built this beautiful one around me, but I hope I can convince you that you need only start with one camera and a computer, or a few cameras and a computer, to look quite professional, I hope. My studio has no engineers to help me, and in that way I've got the cost down to nothing. However, I can imagine people wanting to communicate who would have a small group of supporters. So some of the group would be the talent in front of the camera, and others might actually work behind the camera, or at least help with all the switching and getting the signals to go out into the world. Okay, so when I started writing books about my website, each book, there's usually a page in the middle somewhere. Let me take a look from above, and this is my camera in the ceiling. It helps me to see my working environment and what I'm doing and where I can present particular small object things to you. Here in Great Problems, I think if I go into the middle, let me zoom down a little bit from camera 6, and what I'll do is push this around and then come to it down here, say maybe a little tighter than that. Let's go all the way to this one. Very good. Here's my table of contents. But I think in the preface, maybe I have to go backwards, or maybe I haven't provided in this one the kind of thing I put in free will. So let me take a look at this book. I really enjoyed this one, Why the Free Will Scandal Should Matter to You, and I put in covers of books. How Free Are You? From Ted Honderich. Did My Neurons Make Me Do This? From Nancy Murphy. Is conscious will an illusion? We discussed this illusion concept a few days ago. And the determinist Derek Pereboom writing Living Without Free Will. Free will has become a really major sort of problem area. And here we go through the books. And once again, I thought I had a page, but now I'm not sure I'm able to find it. That says, here it is, how to use this book with the I-Phi website. And the notion of what I'm trying to say in the book is nothing but a gateway, an introduction into the website. So let's see if I can. Basically, it tells you there are multiple entry points into the website from this book. There are URLs at the bottom of the chapters frequently. I don't see one there. And it teaches you what the website looks like. So that's what I want to show you today. What does this website look like, and how can you use it? So the drop-down menus in my website are like this one. I drop down all of the problems. Let me take this full screen again so you can see what I'm doing. The knowledge section of the website has its own drop-down menu with a number of things that relate to questions like epistemology, ontology, and whether knowledge has always existed or it emerges, the problem of emergence, and so forth. I have a section on value. I have a section on free will, of course. I have a section on the mind, which will come up a bit today because panpsychism is there, and the notion of agency, the mind-body problem, and so forth. I have a short section on chance because I'm trying to study whether chance is ontologically real in the universe, and I see this, I need to pull over. This is a wonderful ability I have to bring in a view of things and make it available to you. This drop-down menu goes all the way down to Schrodinger's cat, you'll see at the bottom, in the two-slit experiment. A great deal of my work has been on the philosophical understanding of quantum mechanics. It's a great bridge between philosophy, which is traditionally a group of problems that have been worried about, argued about since the Greeks, and down to today. And I've studied all of that and hope to provide on this website resources. And on the left side of the web page, you see what those resources are web pages on individual philosophers. Look, here's Augustine, here's Anaximander. We should find Aristotle here somewhere. There you go. Thomas Aquinas. So my studies have consisted of usually getting books on these thinkers and working to understand them the best I can, sometimes in a particular problem area to see what they thought about problems that remain today and are thought to be the major problems. But by and large, they're an introduction to these thinkers, not unlike what the Wikipedia gives you, or perhaps the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. The Stanford Encyclopedia is similar to what I do, with one enormous difference. In our case, each page is extraordinarily well documented, a strong bibliography, references at the end, and some scholar or scholars have written this page, and they typically update it every few years, so it remains current and a terrific resource, all available to you for free. The address is plato.stanford.edu. And I recommend it strongly. And many of my pages, I link to the related Stanford Encyclopedia page to follow up. But what you get there is the writing from a particular point of view from one or two or three scholars who have contributed to that page. Now, every other page is likely to be a different thinker. And because there's a great deal of controversy over almost all the problems of philosophy, with a great diversity of views coming in, as you jump from page to page on Stanford Encyclopedia, you're likely to have a rather distinctive view. Now, they try to produce a neutral position in each case. I shouldn't suggest that they're all that biased. Indeed, the Wikipedia has a similar sort of problem in that the Wikipedia is put together in the earliest days by self-appointed writers who were given the privilege of being able to edit a page on any topic. And so all the philosophy pages brought in people who just wanted to talk, add some words to the web about the thing they were interested in. And Wikipedia has tried to kind of manage the content, the quality of the content on each page, by having people look at it and comment and say, you need to add a reference here, let's give you, provide some more verification. They discourage the idea, which Stanford Encyclopedia doesn't, that the work should be giving the opinions and the best thoughts or the best current knowledge about a problem by the author. So the Wikipedia has tended to slip into giving us wonderful biographical background. If it's one of these philosophers, you can always get their date of birth and where they were born and what their background is, what their interest is, usually, with their books often cited, but it's rather thin compared to, there is no critical analysis of any philosopher as to say, this philosopher really knows what he's talking about on this subject, but less so on another, and that sort of opinion, which it seems to me is extremely important for you who are budding philosophers and would like to get into this work, this field, or just are curious about what I describe as what I hope to describe for you as the fundamental nature of reality and your place in the universe. So one of my jobs is to understand reality from the tiniest microphysics problems and how it is those work out, and then a time perspective from when the universe began. It did begin. We have a creation, and we have a creation process. We now can say things that are required in order to create something new, which I believe is original to my work, since I am focusing on the information content of the universe as opposed to the material content. We need to understand the matter and see if we can explain to you the physical laws that govern how matter interacts with radiation, especially. Matter and energy interactions are critically important to understanding everything. And I would like to But I would like to say that the material and the energy and all of its interactions with one another at the level of physics and then of chemistry and perhaps even into biology, while all of that seems to be something we can describe, and I hope to present animated pictures, videos, animations which illustrate the mechanisms by which all of this is going on, my focus is on those situations in which the entities involved are, in a sense, knowing what they're doing. They are interacting by rules that have been encoded in the mechanism, and what I'm talking about, of course, is living things. The biological world is a world in which there is purpose. The individual cells are all in a little dog-eat-dog, cell-eat-cell mode of improving themselves, reproducing themselves, and using information which is encoded in things like our DNA and smaller items within the cells, all the way down to what I will be describing and do describe as molecular machines, because they seem so like machines that humans have invented and built over the years. Tiny little things that are spinning at thousands of rotations per second in order to get some repetitive job done, moving sometimes one single particle, that is to say, for example, an electron or a proton or an ion of a certain sodium or calcium at a time, one at a time. It's moving things into the right places for you to be you. Your body is material, but without the information processing and the information management in these machines, and then in the cells, and then in large machinery in the cells, the biggest one is the so-called ribosome that builds our proteins, and they are machines. Certainly they look like something, an assembly line in a factory in which amino acids are being put one after the other to create the proteins, which when folded up become the little molecular machines. It's a marvelous picture, and as I say, I'm hoping to develop that picture from the tiniest particles of the universe and the rules that are by which they can act, and then include them in a picture in which it's a living system. And as I say, that living system must bring in matter. From the cellular level up, we're all eating something, and bring in energy. And that energy has to be what's known as free energy. It has to have in it a potential to do work. It has to have what's called available energy that can be converted in our bodies, or if it's one cell at a time, for that cell to be able to move itself around if it's a mobile cell. So from that bottom-up story, I want to bring in the picture in which biology controls what it's doing by an information management scheme. I wish I had a better name. I hesitate to develop jargon, as many thinkers do, which then I would explain to you as covering this thing that's going on. And then I just don't really feel that I should go there in terms of inventing terms. But the thing that I'm now stressing is that the matter and the energy are flowing through our bodies. They flow through the cells, they flow through our bodies as a whole, and they are involved in creating new, what shall I say, new instances of cells that have died. From the time we are born, some cells are not making it, and they need to be lost, shed out of the body, and new ones built from new matter coming in. And so I have this argument that you and I are matter and energy flowing through the part of us that's maintained for years and years and years, and that's done with information. So I argue that we are information structures, and the information is not the matter and it's not the energy. It needs the matter to be embodied. Everything I know is embodied and coded somewhere in my brain. But the information itself is immaterial. It needs to be embodied in order for us to use it or to see it, but we do not, it isn't the matter itself that's in charge. The ideas are immaterial, abstract, and that's why I argue we are that information, because in our brains there is stored all of our experiences, something I model with what I call my experience recorder and reproducer. And if it were not stored there and reproducible, we wouldn't know anything. The whole problem of human knowledge can be reduced to figuring out how it is that experience is encoded in our neocortex, in the long neurons that can somewhere at the synapses, some people argue, there can be hardwired, permanently wired things that represent our experiences so they can be played back later. So I have a story that starts down at the molecular level and moves on up to explaining all of life, and I'll have a parallel story that starts with the universe and just galaxies, stars, and planets, or the original elementary particles that go through forming all of those passive information structures, which have no information control over them. The control of a galaxy, a star, and a planet is simply the physical forces like gravity, which pulls them together and produces these bright objects, generating thermonuclear energy, the stars. But they are otherwise passive. That is to say, everything is just happening to them. When you cross into living things, something absolutely wonderful happens. And I guess philosophers have thought for centuries or millennia that somehow some gift from super being has been given to us. But what has happened is that we have evolved to a level where we are able to reason, to think, and we're doing it with a mind that is an information processing system on top of our brain, our hardware. That's the old idea. The mind is the software in the hardware and the software processing in the hardware. Now that is not just in our mind, it's all the way down, because the cells themselves are miniature little information managers, processors, which are controlling the flow of the needed molecules that make up an amino acid, and in turn make up a protein, which turns into an enzyme when it folds properly, and it can become a little nanomotor, which moves the parts of our cells around. It's an absolutely wonderful view, which starts with molecules and ends up with people, which is why I think I can give you, over these years of talking, coming to my lectures, I hope you'll come away with a picture of a marvelous, evolved entity, which is what we are. So, where should I go from here? Oh, I was looking at our problems page, because once again I want to say that I have written these things I'm talking to you about. I've written them down. I put them on web pages. My website has had a couple million visitors, and I'm happy, and some individual pages of a philosopher typically have 10, 20, 30, even 50,000 views and visitors. So I know that people are finding them maybe by Google searches, or because they have an interest in philosophy or a particular problem in physics. They're coming here and they're finding this as a resource. Nevertheless, not everyone uses the web, so I've decided to produce books. And my books are basically introductions to this. See if I've got them here. My books are introductions to my website. Strictly speaking, my major work goes into the website, and the supporting work like books. Some people may love books and may learn, I hope, a lot from just my books, but the website I am trying to turn into a tool with very unusual capabilities. 30 years ago, 20 years ago, when I was first working with creating knowledge base systems, the web came around and offered this ability, a magical ability, which is known as hyperlinking or hypertext, in which when you go into a page, let's just switch back to our problems page here for a moment. Take a look in here. Maybe I'll take that to the full screen. I'll expand it up. Anything that's blue, you probably have learned from other examples of wandering around the web, that anything that's blue, and I use the standard blue and a blue underline to say this is a hyperlink. So as you're reading through and you see it says, several of these are problems that 20th century philosophers, again full screen, like Ludwig Wittgenstein labeled philosophical puzzles, and Bertrand Russell called pseudo-problems, and then analytical philosopher in the next paragraph, Gilbert Ryle, called them category mistakes. Each one of those links are links to a philosopher. So we could touch Ludwig Wittgenstein, and the page jumps to his page. Describes here his picture theory of language to begin with. Now let's see if I can go back. Up in the upper left corner of this page, there's a little go back arrow, and there we are, we've come back to our problems in philosophy. Now, imagine, if you can, what I'm trying to provide for you. I'm trying to provide a page that describes a particular problem, or a particular thinker, like Ludwig Wittgenstein. Now, you can read what I write, and you will have learned what I'm able to give you by writing particularly. But if we go back to Wittgenstein for just a moment, you'll see I also provide large quotations, okay? Large, here are entries from his notebooks, which I have worked on Wittgenstein's notebooks, and I've scanned them in and then turned them into HTML, including illustrations like this little two men fencing with one another. And I've done that. It isn't easy, I'm sorry to say, or I would have done a lot more. It isn't easy to go get an original source. So the Wittgenstein notebooks are in the Widener library. I don't own them, but I can borrow them from the library. I can take them to my desk upstairs. This is my studio. 2 floors up is my major collection of philosophical books, and where I sit when I do most of my writing. And next to my computer, I have a scanner. And the scanner runs a wonderful program that says not only can I scan a picture and give it in a form that I can put on the web, but it can scan and then turn it into text. It used to be quite a few errors, missing letters and so forth, but it's gotten to be phenomenally accurate today. A scanner that costs $100 can take text like this text of Wittgenstein here and give it to me. And it can even give me a little picture, which I had to cut out and edit and turn into an image that went in line here with the text, just like Wittgenstein had done it in his original. Now, I can also create what's called a PDF of this document, or I can get a PDF of an article written by a philosopher or a scientist, which will not normally be available to the general public. Now, since I'm hoping to reach anyone who's interested in these deep, deep questions about the nature of reality and deep questions about your place in the universe, in your culture, wherever you are around the world, I have this wide open idea that internet television or webcasting, like podcasting before it, podcasting is primarily audio recordings, low data, whereas video, webcasting is a very much more difficult thing to move a lot of video around the world, but it's happening now. And now it's the first day of 1918, and this year we cross a major milestone. More than half the world's video is seen on a smartphone, and more than half the people in the world have a smartphone. My smartphone is the Apple iPhone 10, I'm happy to say. I've been buying the iPhones since the first day they were shipped. Many years ago, I worked with Steve Jobs briefly, hoping to license him some technology. And shortly after that, I became the 11th developer certified by Apple to write programs for the new Macintosh in 1984. And at that time, I wrote what's called a desktop publishing program, the type of program that I used to produce this book. Now, self-publishers usually are considered cranks, and in a sense, I am a sort of crank in some ways, but I built the tool that allows me to lay out pages of a book or a newspaper. So my program was used by a lot of people producing news magazines and things like that. But here I am trying to do this on the web, and I should focus again just on my web pages and what they are meant to do for you. I've given you the most important ideas of a philosopher like Wittgenstein, and I've done it by getting his work, the essential parts of it, out of a massive corpus sometimes. I mean, he wrote a great deal. And I try to pull out of that the most important stuff, but then I can also give you a complete PDF. Now, I rarely give you more than a section, or in the case of an article, a scientific article or a philosophical article that might run to 10 or 15 pages, I download that. I have faculty access to all of the publications that Harvard subscribes to. And that gives me an enormous advantage over you. And my goal here, and it's somewhat radical, going along with the idea that information wants to be free, because my readers, because you self-select as interested in these problems of philosophy or science, I give you a link to an important article that this particular philosopher or scientist has written. Otherwise, you're never going to see the original work. Now, you may be a young student in Bangladesh or Japan or Africa somewhere. I want to provide you the same thing you would get if you were a student at MIT or Harvard here or Brown or anywhere. And all those schools are providing courses today, courseware, which tries to teach a great deal. Usually it's computer science or some other modern thing, and it's easy to provide what you need to know over the web. But since I'm trying to teach you things that have been developed over thousands of years, and there are complicated issues and debates going on between thinkers, my goal with the website is to provide an introductory page to each thinker and an introductory page to each problem. And then these problems and pages are all hyperlinked. And if we go back to this one, let's see if I can find a good example. I guess I'm working my way through Wittgenstein's works and some of my own thoughts. But there are links to particular problems. I saw one going by there. Let's, I think maybe that's enough. I also have the ability to put in these little right-hand callouts, okay? Here I'm saying we can compare Wittgenstein's picture writing or Bilderschrift to Frege, Gottlob Frege's concept writing, which he called Begriffsschrift. That's just a link across to another great philosopher, Frege, who played an enormous role. And as I scan down the page, here's a link to knowledge and my experience recorder and reproducer. So there you see we've jumped off a page of a philosopher, and we've jumped into a problem area. In this case, the experience recorder is an attempt to describe how it is you and I learn things. How do our experiences get recorded as information that is stored and is later retrievable when we need our past experience and or our knowledge? I mean, knowledge is a sort of rarefied notion that it's things that we learn because we read things or people tell us things, but the broad what's going on in the brain is experiences being recorded. so that when we later encounter a similar situation, the brain flashes back to the original experiences, which some of which might have been turned out to be the right thing to do, others turned out not to be the right thing to do, very quickly and probably at a subconscious or level, as William James would say it. We're looking at all those past experiences and using them to make the decision, make the choice, make the decision to will a certain action and then go out and take responsibility for that. That whole story has to be figured out, and that's what I'm trying to do with my page on the experience recorder and reproducer. But backing up, I want you to see that's a website up there. Basically, always have the top page, the header of my website, and across it, it has a lot of drop-down menus, as you just saw. It has a search box, which to me, the whole idea of a Google search was an absolutely wonderful technology development. And Google gives us the ability to put a search not in general on the web, but in for specific search on this website with these thousands of pages. So let's pick something. For example, I'm going to talk today about the mind and about the wave function. So let's just go to the search box, and you see a black keyboard shows up at the bottom. We can type in WAVE space FUNCTION, wave function. I've got it right. And I say go do that. And this, in fact, is Google at work. What Google has done is give me the code to put their search engine into my website and say, just look on this website. Don't go look on the web as a whole. You can, of course, always go and look at the web as a whole. That's a very good way to learn more, and I encourage you. But this allows me frequently to find work I've done which isn't really otherwise organized into my drop-down menus. And you can see the page looks different. We're now on this page which is called a results page from Google. And at the top, we see collapse of the wave function, wave-particle duality, the many worlds interpretation, the information interpretation. Maybe I should give you this larger view so you can see what's here. And if we go back up, it finds, Google finds that other people have put in that search phrase, wave function. And Google then turns around and says, tell me, what were the questions that were asked by people in general about the wave function? So I've been able to embed that into my site, and there it is. What is the wave function? And what is a wave function collapse? And what is decoherence? This is quite interesting that they should get out to this rather esoteric notion of decoherence, which is a big group of people who have their own interpretation of quantum mechanics today. They're very prominent. A lot of people think that's exactly the new way to think about quantum mechanics. And then they have measurement in quantum mechanics. So it said what is decoherence, but they didn't give us decoherence here, which is interesting. They do, however, give us several others. I could now go back to this site and take out the wave function and put in decoherence is what I'd like to do, and I guess I missed it. So let me stop trying to do that, get back to our main subject here. The website is something I want you to be able to use. And one way you can use it is simply searching through it, scroll through this list of philosophers, pick one. Here I'm on the free will page, so beyond the list of thinkers, right? See, here's Aristotle and Aquinas and others. But above them, I have a section when I'm in free will, and I have a similar section when I'm in the knowledge part of the website that shows the core concepts that have names and the philosophers working in this field recognize most of those words and use them in their articles. If you don't in their books, if you don't recognize the terminology, you have this great battle to get through to understanding what's going on. Sadly, many people don't ever get past that because they really can't comprehend the concepts. So what I've done is to give you pages which are devoted to an explanation, a deep explanation of the one concept. Now, any particular concept, I do then have links away from that concept, but if you go into chance, you see a link to causal determinism, you see a link to mechanical determinism and indeterminism and so forth. But I've got something else here, and I've just realized I don't have a link to this anymore. But that is, I will just drive there by going to, yeah, I've been modifying the website lately. And one of the things I've done is hide my so-called, let's see, afterwards. This is not easy to do. Afterwards / glossary. I want to show you that I have built, I better not talk while I'm trying to type because I won't be able to get it in here for you. Okay, afterwards glossary. Let's give this a try. All right. Since I'm really wanting you to get familiar with what I've built, let me just from the top argue that my goals are to reach all of you who want to understand the nature of reality and your place in the universe. And to do that, I'm basically trying to provide you with what I regard as a new method of philosophizing. And that method is to not just try to explain things, although I'm doing that right now, and of course we all learn by reading things or listening to someone like this. I want to provide a method that doesn't just focus on the words and the meanings of the words, although I'll do my best to define them for you. That's what the glossary is. I want the method to be based in information structures, which are information processing going on inside me, inside you. I'm basically trying to get information out of myself, explain it to you with words and pictures when I give you diagrams and animations. And I want you to have that to get around the tendency, especially in philosophy, for people to quibble, to play with words and win out an argument by having the fancier words or the fancier arguments, the great notion of rhetoric. The greater speaker wins the argument because they're taught to win arguments, like famously the lawyers who can defend any side of any issue, and they're basically not trying to teach you something about the nature of the universe. They're basically trying to win a case for their clients and so forth. So when it comes to these online resources that I built, the website is the primary thing. I'm doing lectures, though, because lectures can reach people over the internet and in YouTube and Facebook, which are hugely growing new social groups who are involved in social media. And I hope to go through that system and reach people who will come back and look at my website. And I want to encourage you to see that my goal is to give you resources that are not available to people outside the academic world. I enjoy a great privilege of access to all of the knowledge that can be put online for the use of faculty everywhere. And I just want to try to put enough of that out there for those of you who want to basically have had the best education you could have on the subject area you are interested in, if it's part of what I'm covering, namely deep thinking about philosophy, physics, biology, psychology, and so forth. And so here's this glossary. Let me just give you a quick look at this. You see that I have an alphabetical index into a topic, and each topic, like here we have actualism, the idea that only the things that happened could possibly have happened, that there were no possibilities in the world. And you see that besides a definition, in the defining paragraph, I add other glosses in the glossary, and you see alternative possibilities, alternative sequences, consequence argument, the direct argument, the indirect argument, the master argument, and the standard argument. All important alternative ways that philosophers have been using to talk about this whole issue, in this case of actualism. And so they go. And this is an enormous page. I spent many, many months developing this. And when I did it, let's take an interesting one if I can find it. Here's the basic argument of Galen Strawson. Now, Galen Strawson's argument is too deep to go into right now. I just want to point out that it's related in other glosses to the direct argument, the standard argument, ultimacy, and so forth, ultimate responsibility. But notice that I can find an I-Phi web page. You see that I-Phi page, or I can just search I-Phi. So let me just touch search I-Phi, because instead of having you type basic argument into your search bar that I've built into the website for you, you can simply touch search I-Phi, and it goes off and it performs that search that we just looked up. And we find a PDF, and I've put up a PDF of Galen Strawson's, okay, there's a little PDF indicator, Galen Strawson's article called The Impossibility of Moral Responsibility. And I've given you a link to Galen Strawson's webpage, which starts off with, there's an argument, which I call the basic argument, which appears to prove that we cannot be truly or ultimately morally responsible for our actions. Now, there must be a dozen at least, maybe twice that, of philosophers who argue we cannot be morally responsible. And their reasons are, from physics, they assume we're all determined and so forth. This is a major part of my interest. I hate to get off into the specifics, because what I'm trying to show you is that my website has got this general set of tools, including that glossary, which is here, and including 1,000 or so, or several hundred pages on philosophers, thousands of pages on problems, and I want you to be able to get into it and get out of it easily. And you may want to come to my books if you want to read it in a kind of continuous, more linear fashion. Or I hope you'll join me in these lectures. It's the first of the year 2018, and I'm hoping to be able to lecture to you, if I'm well and last long enough, 5 days a week. All of them aimed to getting you familiar with problems that I call great enough for us to not really understand them without a certain amount of training and education, and I'm hoping to provide that for you. So it's Monday is great problems, Tuesday is free will, specifically. On Wednesday we pick up one of those philosophers or scientists from my drop-down menu on the left side, up there. On Thursday, we turn to problems that I've taken up in my book called Metaphysics, and I've actually built a separate website called The Metaphysicist, which I think I have over here. Let me just switch to the left-hand screen. I encourage you to take a look at that. And although that's very, very specialized, I don't think many of you will want to go deeply into great questions of metaphysics, but I have, and I put it up there for you, and I put it in a separate website. Finally, on Fridays, we turn to Albert Einstein, and I've finally gotten back to writing the words of chapters 17 and 18, and I'll be hoping to get that book out sometime in the spring, because I believe Albert Einstein understood quantum physics better than those who criticized him for years, those who said he was senile, those who said he's not getting it, the new quantum mechanics is something different and wonderful. I hope to show you that Einstein was looking for what he called a local objective reality. and I am going to follow his arguments, put them on my webpage for Albert Einstein, which I think I don't have a link to it right now, and we're running out of time, but we'll take up on a Friday each week. Tomorrow we'll turn to free will. I hope you'll come back and join me. Thank you.